Welcome to the Haunted Brew. Grab your favorite blend of coffee or tea and pull up a comfy chair for some unexplainable and unsettling stories. Ones that may leave you intrigued or sleeping with a light on tonight. My mother, who's in her mid-50s now, has never been overly religious. She does have her certain habits though, like praying every night and occasionally reading scripture. It gives her comfort, especially around this time of year. Fall has always been her favorite season, but it also holds some unsettling memories for her. Memories that I hadn't yet known. Growing up, we used to enjoy the typical Halloween festivities together. Every October, we'd carve pumpkins, decorate, just go out and enjoy fall treats. I even got her to attend a few haunted hayrides, but there was always one tradition she flat out refused to ever take part in. Anything involving spirits, ghost hunts, or certain horror movies that involved the paranormal or possession. One chilly autumn evening, the kind where the air smells like fallen leaves and bonfire smoke, I asked her if she wanted to join some friends and me for a ghost tour of an old Baptist cemetery. Her response was immediate and firm. An absolute no. I pressed her on it, as always, and she shut it down even harder, saying she would never take part in anything that could summon spirits or even dabble in them. She was serious, so much in a way that it somewhat caught me off guard. I knew she had a strange history with these things, but I never knew why. So one night when we got back in and the mood was lighthearted, I finally summoned the courage to ask her what made her so fearful of anything remotely related to the supernatural. After a long pause, she told me about something that happened when she was a teenager, during one particular autumn evening at a friend's house. I could tell she didn't want to speak on it, but I could also tell she wanted me to finally know. It was late October, and the air was cold, piercing even, as it whistled through small crevices of the house. She and a few friends were having a small sleepover. The living room was warm with the scent of cider candles, and outside the wind rustled the dead leaves. They had all been playing board games while the friends' parents were out for the evening. One of the girls suddenly pulled out something that my mom had never played before, only seen. It was old, wooden, and worn. The perfect kind of creepy. I'm sure by now you've probably guessed what it was. Her friend explained that it was a Ouija board, something they could use to contact the other side, supposedly. Back before, these boards weren't seen as evil or malicious. They were simply seen as an innocent, although spooky game. My mom, curious and not knowing any better, went along with it, although I'm sure there was some peer pressure involved. The game began harmlessly enough, with giggles and light-hearted questions. But as the time passed ever so slowly, the mood shifted. They asked the board if there were any spirits around. The planchette slid smoothly to yes. The room grew quiet, apart from the gasps and squeals from the girls blaming one another for moving the piece. But the next question they asked was the one that started everything. Can you show yourself? Everyone froze, expecting something to happen. And for a brief second, the room was just completely, utterly still. The flame from the candle danced, but no one dare said a word. Moments later, they nervously laughed off the strange stillness, and then went on to ask more questions. Another friend then asked, "Who are you?" The planchette moved slowly this time, tracing letters around the board. The answer came in a deliberate, eerie sequence. Hate. They all thought it was a joke. Maybe the board was just designed to do such a thing. It couldn't be real. One of them must be pushing it, right? Without even thinking, they decided to test the spirit and ask it to show itself again. Silence at first, just like the first time. But then, from the reflection in the darkened TV screen across the room, they all saw it. A figure, shadowy and motionless, sitting on the couch behind them. No one had noticed it before. The temperature in the room was also much colder than the chilly fall air that happened to creep in. Panic gripped them as they abandoned the game, stuffing the board back into the box and throwing it in the trash. The girls scurried to my mom's friend's room and didn't say a word for the remainder of the night. One night, a couple days after the events, my mom lay in bed feeling restless. She said she couldn't get to sleep. There was a sound, something deep and muffled, a faint yet unmistakable thumping on the roof. She said it sounded like a pack of dogs were just pacing back and forth up there. She listened for a long time, frozen and too scared to move, yet also too afraid to speak the truth to her parents. Within that same week, her friend's parents had mentioned hearing strange sounds around their house. Of course, without the knowledge of what happened that night. They were figuring it for issues with the plumbing or something along those lines. As for my mom, it was as if a streak of bad luck had hit her life for an extended period of time. Then out of nowhere, it just ceased. That's the story she told me, and it's why she refuses to take part in anything related to ghost hunts, seances, or spirits in general. It took her a lot of courage to even speak on it, and I could tell she was afraid of awakening something by even speaking on its memory. Every time she recounts that night, the air seems to turn a little colder, and the rustling leaves outside don't seem so pleasant. She truly believes that something dark and evil visited them that autumn night, maybe if just for a warning. And honestly, the way she tells it, I believe it too. Over a decade ago now, I was working at a mid-sized firm located on the outskirts of the city. The company had a workforce of about 80 employees, and because of this, the atmosphere was very close-knit. However, there came a day where the business was sold to new owners, and with them came a wave of changes. The new management didn't waste any time and decided to make a significant overhaul. They laid off a handful of employees, a decision that left a palpable tension in the office. Among those let go was a coworker I'll call Mike. Mike had been with the company for several years, and his departure wasn't exactly unexpected. He had a reputation for being difficult. His temper was short, and he had a knack for creating conflict. Many of us had also noticed how unkempt he was, and his attire for the job never really seemed fitting. And though we were sad to see a colleague lose their job, most of us weren't particularly surprised. About a week after the layoffs, I received an unexpected phone call. It was Mike, and he wanted to meet me for coffee. I was a bit taken aback because despite working together for years, we had never really gotten close. His personality and the way he presented himself was never really favorable to me. Definitely not someone I would be inclined to get to know as a friend. He explained that he wanted to thank me for helping him learn how to operate various machines. He said the skills I taught him would be invaluable as he looked for a new job. It was a bit odd, but I agreed to meet him, though I assumed there would be a group of us given the context. On the day we were to meet, Mike arrived alone. We met at a small local cafe not far from the office. The initial part to the outing was relatively normal. We chatted about the autumn colors and made small talk about various things from our favorite coffee blends to our everyday hobbies. It felt like a regular thing between coworkers and even friends, but there was an undercurrent of tension. As we sipped at our beverages and ordered a couple pastries, Mike seemed increasingly agitated. It wasn't long before his demeanor shifted from cordial to more distressed. He suddenly began to talk about his recent firing, and then my mood shifted too. I have to admit I was a bit disappointed, as I sort of assumed this was his true intent from the start. His frustration was evident as he recounted his feelings of betrayal and anger. Mike had always felt like an outsider, and his dismissal had only intensified those feelings. He vented about how unfair it was, how he had given years to that company only to be discarded like something of pure uselessness, expendable. I listened sympathetically, acknowledging his feelings even though I wasn't entirely surprised by his reaction. As the conversation progressed, Mike's anger seemed to deepen, if ever so slightly. He started mentioning names of people he felt had wronged him. The way he spoke about them was unsettling. He described how he would like to get them back, even if it was played off by a chuckle. His words were filled with a bitterness that was hard to ignore. I tried to brush off the comments, attributing them to his current state of frustration and anger. Even if some of it was a little uncalled for, I just figured he needed to vent. After the cafe, we headed back to the office in Mike's car, as he had picked me up from the office for break. The drive began quietly, but soon Mike began to speak more openly. He talked about how simple it would be to damage the building. He mentioned that it wouldn't be too hard to board up the doors from the outside and just set the place on fire. The way he spoke about these actions was disturbingly casual, as if he were just discussing weekend plans rather than violent sabotage, like I wasn't even there. He continued to make the same comment about how he could do damage to the building, all while trying to play it off with a joking attitude. But his tone was shifting. As we finally approached the office and I was now on the edge of my seat, he reassured me that, despite his anger, I was safe because I was his friend. But the way he said that made me feel anything but. It was as if he were trying to make sure I understood that I was in his favor, despite his broader threats. I stepped out quickly and said my goodbyes, eager to escape the uncomfortable situation. I then watched from a window near my boss's desk as Mike's car remained parked in the lot. He hadn't left. My concern grew as the minutes ticked by, and I decided to inform my boss about our disturbing conversation. My boss took my concerns seriously and immediately called 911. The police arrived within minutes, their presence bringing a sense of urgency and also relief. They approached Mike's car and found him still lingering on the premises. The officers then had him open the trunk, and what they found was deeply alarming. Inside were several boards, a length of rope, and a few firearms. The discovery was shocking. The officers questioned Mike further, and he ultimately agreed to be taken into custody and to seek professional help. The potential harm was significant. Given the layout of our office, Mike could have caused extensive damage, and quickly, if he had chosen to act on his growing rage. The thought that many lives could have been lost that day, including my own, made me sick. I wasn't able to work for the rest of that day. The experience had a lasting impact on me. I was constantly reminded of the importance of paying attention to the warning signs and taking threats seriously. The day Mike was fired and the events that followed became a sobering lesson in how crucial it is to remain vigilant. There are potential dangers that can arise from even the most seemingly harmless and unexpected situations. I've always been drawn to the eerie thrill of abandoned places. On the evening of this story, I found myself in an old, weather-beaten house deep in the country, my camera and flashlight in tow. My plan was to capture the haunting beauty of the place and compile it into a video, an exploration of the house's history while carefully examining any oddities and trinkets. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I ventured in, feeling that familiar thrill of the unknown. The air inside was thick, with dust and decay. My flashlight easily cut through the darkness, revealing a once opulent interior now reduced to a derelict ruin. Wallpaper peeled from the walls in tattered strips, exposing stained plaster beneath. The wooden floor creaked underfoot, and the mixed smells of the fresh outdoors and dust was potent. I began my exploration on the ground floor, all while quietly voicing my thoughts and feelings as I moved through the house. Each room seemed to tell its own story, and I was so engrossed in documenting every detail. But as night fully descended, an eerie sensation began to settle over me. With my camera rolling, I decided to venture upstairs. The second floor was even more decrepit than the first, with sagging ceilings and buckling floorboards. Yet there was a strange and compelling beauty in it all. I soon found myself in what must have once been a master bedroom. The remnants of an old bed frame lay strewn about, and a large cracked window offered a view of the surrounding wood. It was then that I noticed something unsettling. Standing by the large broken window upstairs, I scanned the tree line beyond the house with my flashlight. The beam pierced through the darkness, but it was what I saw without the aid of my light that momentarily took my breath away. There at the edge of the forest appeared to be a silhouette, dark and unmoving against the trees. I quickly turned my flashlight to where I saw it. I shook my head, trying to convince myself it was just a trick of the light or perhaps a figment of my imagination fueled by the house's eerie atmosphere. But at that moment, rational thought eluded me, and I struggled to grasp it against my fear. To calm myself, I decided to take a break. I leaned against the wall and turned on one of my ground lights, reviewing the footage on my camera. It was then that I heard a distant, unnerving call, a high, drawn-out wail that instantly made me envision a banshee. My heart pounded in my ears from the sudden fear, though I knew that sound, and I knew that was likely a call of a fox, or possibly even a bobcat or a mountain lion. Despite it most likely being a natural nocturnal call, hearing it alone in the middle of the night, in an isolated old home, was deeply disturbing. I could just imagine if someone didn't know what type of call that would have been, how much panic could have taken over them. Determined not to let my imagination get the better of me, I gathered my things and decided it was time to leave. I made my way down the stairs, the house now seeming even more foreboding in the darkness after these two unsettling experiences. My flashlight oddly flickered as I exited through the front door and made my way back to the truck. The cold night air felt refreshing, though it did little to calm the unease that had settled over me. The feeling of being watched lingered, but I told myself it was merely an overactive imagination. There was just something different about that night. While I consider myself a skeptic, I kept wondering if that shadow and cry were as harmless as I originally thought. It's one of those things that just gnaws at you. The what-ifs we never truly know. It's just crazy to me how easily the unknown can twist the familiar into something far more chilling.